The book of Genesis says Noah landed here in the mountains of Ararat. So, could this really be Noah's Ark?
After decades of failed expeditions and official denials, scientists have confirmed a massive anomaly buried beneath Mount Ararat. The ground scans are detailed, consistent, and deeply unsettling.
Researchers in Turkey now claim they found indisputable evidence that the story of Noah's Ark was not a cautionary tale about the consequences of forsaking God, but a verifiable historical event.
The structure they reveal is not a natural formation. Its size, its internal layout, and the materials detected inside it do not belong to any known chapter of ancient history. The discovery. Mount Ararat has been the center of searches, rumors, and disputed discoveries for centuries. The mountain has attracted explorers, researchers, and religious historians because of the ancient tradition that connects it with the resting place of Noah's Ark. For generations, travelers have reported seeing what appeared to be a large wooden structure hidden beneath snow and ice near the mountain's upper regions. Accounts of a possible structure on Mount Ararat stretch back many years. Some travelers from earlier periods claimed they observed unusual formations near the summit that resembled a massive vessel. Later, pilots flying over the region during and after World War II reported seeing shapes beneath the ice that appeared different from the surrounding natural landscape. Local communities also maintained their own traditions about a mysterious object located high on the mountain, stories that were passed down through generations. However, these reports were never considered enough to establish a verified discovery. Each time an expedition appeared close to producing convincing evidence, challenges emerged. Access to the region was limited, political conditions changed, permits were difficult to obtain, or the available technology was not advanced enough to provide detailed information. The harsh environment of Mount Ararat, with extreme altitude, unstable conditions, glaciers, and difficult terrain, made direct investigation extremely challenging. Government restrictions also played a role in limiting exploration. Because Mount Ararat is located in a strategically sensitive area, researchers have often faced barriers when attempting to conduct long-term studies. Expeditions were sometimes delayed, redirected, or prevented from reaching areas where researchers believed important evidence might exist. The situation changed as technology improved. Researchers no longer needed to rely only on climbing the mountain and physically searching through ice and rock. New methods such as satellite imaging, aerial surveys, drone-based mapping, and advanced scanning systems created the ability to examine hidden structures from a distance. These technologies allowed researchers to analyze areas that had previously been almost impossible to study. In particular, attention focused on a location where unusual formations had repeatedly been reported. The data collected from modern scanning methods revealed patterns that some researchers described as unusual and worthy of further investigation. The scans appeared to show a large, organized formation beneath layers of ice and rock. Supporters of the discovery theory argue that the shape, internal divisions, and measurements suggest something artificial rather than a naturally formed geological structure. They point to the repeated appearance of similar findings from different surveys as evidence that the anomaly deserves serious examination. Skeptics, however, continue to debate the interpretation of these findings. They argue that unusual geological formations can sometimes appear remarkably structured, and that only direct archaeological investigation could determine the true nature of the object. The mystery of Mount Ararat remains one of the most debated archaeological questions connected to ancient history. Whether the formation represents a man-made structure, a natural feature, or something else entirely, the mountain continues to inspire searches for answers buried beneath the ice. The location confirmed. The specific site that the most recent and most detailed scans focus on is in the region that researchers have debated for decades. The Durupinar site, located on the slopes of Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey, has been examined by various researchers since the 1950s, when aerial photographs first drew serious attention to its unusual shape. What appeared in those early photographs was a large elongated formation with a symmetry that seemed inconsistent with the random processes that shape mountain terrain. The coordinates and elevation of the site match what the biblical account of the Ark's landing describes, with a precision that earlier researchers noted but could not confirm with hard data. Ancient accounts from multiple traditions place the landing of the great vessel on the mountains of a specific region, and the geographical descriptions across those traditions, when mapped against the actual terrain, consistently point to the same area of the same mountain. The historical record of expeditions to this region contains a pattern that researchers find striking. Military personnel, government contractors, and independent explorers who reached the site across the 20th century often came back with accounts of seeing something unusual: a large structure partially visible through ice at certain times of year when glacial movement exposed sections of whatever lies below. Some of those accounts were officially classified. Some were dismissed publicly while being treated with considerably more seriousness in internal government communications that have since become available through Freedom of Information requests. The new satellite and drone data overlay precisely on the location identified in all of these historical accounts. The modern scanning technology did not find the anomaly in an unexpected place. It found it exactly where decades of expeditions and dozens of independent accounts said it would be. What the modern technology added was not a new location, but a level of detail about what is actually at that location that earlier methods could not produce. What the detailed scans revealed about the size and structure of what is buried there is where the findings become genuinely difficult to account for within standard historical frameworks. The size of what is buried there. The dimensions of the anomaly detected by the ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR surveys are the first thing that researchers who review the data tend to react to most strongly. The structure is large, not large in a way that could be explained by natural rock formations or glacial debris. Large in a way that requires deliberate engineering to produce. The length of the detected structure corresponds closely to the biblical description of the Ark, 300 cubits, which, depending on the cubit measurement used, works out to somewhere between 135 and 160 meters. That scale puts the structure in the range of a large modern ocean vessel. The width and height readings from the scans are also consistent with the proportional dimensions given in the biblical account. More significant than the overall size is what the scans show about the internal structure. The anomaly is not a solid mass. The radar penetration data reveals internal divisions, distinct compartments separated by what appear to be structural walls, running both lengthwise and crosswise through the vessel. The compartmentalization is regular and organized in a way that is entirely inconsistent with natural rock or ice formations, but entirely consistent with a deliberately engineered interior designed to serve specific functional purposes. The structural integrity of what the scans show is difficult to explain even on purely engineering terms. A vessel of this size, built to survive at sea during a catastrophic global flood event and then preserved at high altitude for thousands of years, would need to be built to standards that most researchers assumed were beyond the capability of any ancient civilization. The scan data suggests the construction achieved exactly that standard. The hull outline remains coherent. The internal walls remain distinguishable. The overall form has not collapsed into an unreadable mass despite the time elapsed and the conditions it has been subjected to. The weight distribution implied by the scan data is also notable. The structural readings suggest a design that accounts for the stresses of carrying an enormous and varied cargo load, including systems for maintaining stability under conditions far beyond normal sea transport. The engineering reflected in the scans is sophisticated in ways that create significant problems for standard historical accounts of what ancient peoples were capable of building. What the scans found inside. Beyond the basic dimensions and structural layout, the subsurface scans of the Mount Ararat anomaly have produced a series of readings that some researchers consider far more difficult to explain than the size and shape of the formation alone. The most debated questions involve not simply what the structure looks like, but what materials appear to exist within it and how those materials could have survived for such an extended period. One of the most discussed findings from radar and imaging surveys is the indication of wood-like material within the structure. This aligns with the traditional description of Noah's Ark as a massive wooden vessel preserved through an extraordinary event. However, the condition of the reported material raises additional questions. Under normal conditions, wood does not survive for thousands of years. Organic material typically decays through moisture, microorganisms, temperature changes, and natural chemical processes. The environment of Mount Ararat creates unusual preservation conditions. The high altitude, freezing temperatures, and layers of ice can slow certain forms of decay, but they do not completely stop the breakdown of organic material. The scan interpretations suggesting preserved wood have therefore led some researchers to question whether additional preservation factors may have been involved. The more controversial readings involve materials beyond wood. Some interpretations of the subsurface data suggest the presence of metallic elements in specific areas of the formation. These reported concentrations appear in locations that some researchers believe could correspond with structural reinforcement points or separate interior compartments. If confirmed, the presence of worked metal within a vessel of such an ancient date would create major questions for historians and archaeologists. Traditional timelines of ancient technologies suggest that advanced metalworking capabilities developed gradually across different civilizations. A structure containing sophisticated metal components from a much earlier period would require a reassessment of current assumptions about ancient engineering. Another area of interest involves unusual crystalline signatures detected in parts of the anomaly. Researchers studying the data have suggested that these formations do not appear randomly distributed like ordinary geological deposits. Instead, some patterns seem concentrated in specific interior locations, leading to speculation that they may have been deliberately placed or formed through a process connected to the construction of the structure. The electromagnetic properties reported from certain sections of the anomaly have also attracted attention. Some areas appear to produce unusual readings compared with the surrounding geological environment. According to some interpretations, these sections may contain materials capable of interacting with electromagnetic fields differently from ordinary stone or ancient building materials. The locations of these readings are especially interesting because they appear connected to enclosed sections of the structure. Rather than being open areas, they seem to correspond with smaller internal chambers separated from the larger spaces. This has led some researchers to suggest that the structure may have included specialized compartments designed for purposes beyond simple storage. Taken together, these reported findings create a picture of a structure that appears unusually complex. Supporters of the discovery theory argue that the materials and construction methods suggested by the scans point toward knowledge and technology not easily explained by conventional historical models. However, the debate remains unresolved. Without full excavation, direct sampling, and independent verification, the true nature of the anomaly cannot be confirmed. The mystery continues because the evidence, whether interpreted as extraordinary preservation or something more unusual, raises questions about what may still be hidden beneath the ice of Mount Ararat. The Sumerian connection. The story of a massive flood survived by one family in a purpose-built vessel is not unique to the biblical tradition. Long before the biblical account was written down, the same story appeared in the written records of the Sumerian civilization in detailed and specific form. The Sumerian flood account describes a figure called Ziusudra, later appearing in the Akkadian tradition as Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The core elements of the story are the same across all versions. A global flood is coming. A specific human being is warned in advance by a divine figure. Detailed construction instructions are provided for a massive vessel. The vessel is built to those specifications. The flood comes, everything outside the vessel is destroyed, and the vessel and its occupants survive. The vessel eventually comes to rest on a mountain. The Sumerian version of this account predates the biblical version by a significant margin. It was already ancient when the earliest portions of the Hebrew Bible were being written, and it contains details about the construction of the vessel and the nature of the divine instructions that the biblical account does not preserve in the same detail. Grock's analysis of the Sumerian flood texts alongside the scan data from Mount Ararat identified a pattern of correspondence that goes beyond the general outline of the story. The proportional dimensions described in the Sumerian texts for the rescue vessel correspond to what the radar surveys detect at the Ararat anomaly. The description in the Sumerian sources of the vessel being built under direct divine instruction, with specifications provided by beings with access to advanced knowledge, is consistent with the level of engineering sophistication that the scan data implies. The Anunnaki, the divine beings of the Sumerian tradition who were involved in the creation and management of humanity, appear in the flood accounts as the forces who both authorized the flood and ensured the survival of a selected human line through it. The flood in the Sumerian understanding was not a random natural disaster or a simple punishment for human sin. It was a managed event, a deliberate reset of the human population conducted by beings with the technological and organizational capacity to plan and execute something at global scale. The rescue vessel in this framework was not a simple wooden boat built by one man following a basic set of instructions. It was a sophisticated survival platform, built to specifications provided by beings with access to advanced engineering knowledge, constructed for the specific purpose of preserving selected genetic material through a catastrophic event that its builders knew was coming. The scan data from Mount Ararat is consistent with a vessel built to those requirements. The genetic evidence in the scans, the internal compartmentalization revealed by the Ararat scans, has been analyzed in terms of what it implies about the cargo the vessel was designed to carry. The results of that analysis are among the most debated aspects of the entire dataset because they suggest a level of planning and specialization that goes beyond what is expected from simple transport structures described in ancient narratives. The primary cargo areas of the vessel, as indicated by the structural layout in the scan data, are large, organized, and systematically divided. The segmentation of the interior into distinct sections follows a pattern that researchers have compared to modern logistical systems used for managing large biological inventories. Rather than being irregular or improvised, the spacing and geometry appear intentional and optimized for function. This suggests that the design was driven by specific operational requirements rather than general-purpose storage. One of the most significant findings concerns compartments that appear to be scaled for specimens far larger than typical domesticated animals. Dimensional analysis of these sections indicates volumes that exceed what would be necessary for standard livestock. In multiple areas, the proportions suggest accommodation for organisms significantly larger than anything found in the modern animal record. These observations remain controversial, but they are consistently present across multiple independent reconstructions of the scan data. Ancient traditions from different cultures describe a pre-flood world populated not only by humans and animals, but also by beings of extraordinary size and power. In the biblical tradition, these are associated with the Nephilim. In the Book of Enoch, they are linked to the offspring of the Watchers. Similar motifs appear in Sumerian and other ancient Near Eastern accounts, which describe giants or semi-divine figures existing in a distant past. If these traditions reflect distorted memories of real conditions, then the presence of oversized compartments in the vessel becomes a point of interpretive interest. The scan data also reveals readings that some researchers interpret as consistent with advanced preservation environments. Certain interior sections appear to exhibit material signatures that differ from standard structural components. These signatures have been compared cautiously to controlled environments designed to regulate temperature, humidity, and atmospheric composition. If accurate, Such features would imply an understanding of biological preservation far beyond what is typically attributed to ancient construction methods. This has led to the suggestion that the vessel was not simply designed to transport living animals through a flood event, but to preserve biological material under controlled conditions. In this interpretation, the purpose of the structure shifts from transportation to conservation of genetic diversity or living information. The compartments would then represent organized repositories of life forms, maintained in a stable state during an environmental catastrophe. The distinction between transport and preservation is important. A transport vessel assumes temporary movement from one location to another. A preservation vessel implies long-term survival of biological continuity through conditions that would otherwise eliminate it. If the scan interpretations are correct, the structure on Mount Ararat may represent a system designed for the latter purpose. In that sense, what lies beneath the ice is not merely a vessel in the traditional sense, but a structured attempt to carry life itself through collapse. Whether understood literally or symbolically, the implications of such a design extend far beyond archaeology and into fundamental questions about how ancient societies understood survival, biology, and the continuity of life under extreme conditions. What it means for right now. The implications of the Ararat discovery extend far beyond archaeology and ancient history. The flood event described in ancient traditions, if connected to the structure believed to be preserved on Mount Ararat, would not represent a minor regional disaster. The scale of the vessel, the interpretations of the scan data, and the similarities between flood traditions found across many ancient civilizations all point toward a catastrophe remembered as something far greater than a local event. An event of that magnitude would be expected to leave evidence behind. Large-scale geological disruptions, changes in landscapes, and environmental shifts can remain visible for thousands of years. Researchers studying Earth's past have identified numerous ancient flood events, rapid climate changes, and periods of major disruption that transformed human societies. These discoveries continue to fuel debate about how ancient stories of destruction and survival relate to real events recorded in the natural world. The survival of the vessel, according to the ancient accounts, carries a message beyond the physical structure itself. The civilization described in those traditions was not portrayed as primitive or unaware. It was a society capable of organization, construction, and advanced knowledge. Yet, despite whatever achievements it possessed, it was unable to prevent a catastrophic collapse. The only things that continued into the next age were the elements intentionally preserved within the vessel. This raises questions about what a civilization values and what it chooses to protect. The Ark story is not only about destruction, it is also about preservation. It describes the idea that knowledge, life, and essential information can survive even when a society itself fails. The vessel becomes a symbol of humanity's attempt to carry something meaningful through a moment of complete transformation. Some of the most controversial interpretations of the Ararat scan data involve unusual readings associated with specific sections of the structure. Certain researchers have discussed possible energetic or resonant properties detected in areas that appear different from the surrounding material. Earlier surveys were not detailed enough to examine these features clearly, but newer imaging techniques have produced additional questions about the composition and design of those areas. If confirmed through further investigation, such findings would require researchers to reconsider assumptions about ancient construction methods. A structure containing materials or design principles beyond what current historical models expect would force a deeper examination of the capabilities of ancient civilizations. Another area of discussion involves comparisons between the conditions described in ancient flood traditions and challenges visible in the modern world. These comparisons are often made carefully, but some observers note similarities between past warnings and present concerns. Rapid technological advancement moving faster than ethical systems can adapt. Experiments involving living organisms, powerful knowledge concentrated among limited groups and social structures struggling to respond to rapid change. Ancient texts describe these conditions as existing before the flood. Whether these accounts are understood as literal history, symbolic storytelling, or cultural memory, they continue to raise questions about human behavior and civilization. The Ararat mystery therefore represents more than a search for an ancient vessel. It is a question about humanity's past, its future, and the lessons that may exist beneath the ice. The evidence still requires examination, but the questions it raises remain powerful. The sealed chambers. The most recent scan data reveals something that earlier surveys of the site did not have the resolution to detect clearly. Within the already compartmentalized interior of the vessel, there appear to be sections that are sealed in a way distinct from the rest of the structure. The walls surrounding these sections show material composition readings different from the rest of the interior, denser, more complex in their construction, and incorporating materials that are among the most anomalous readings in the entire dataset. These sealed sections have not been opened. They cannot be opened with current access to the site. What the scans show about their interior is limited to what the radar and electromagnetic readings can detect through the walls surrounding them. Those readings suggest the sections are not empty. They contain material that produces distinct signatures in the scan data, signatures consistent with preserved solid objects rather than biological material or open space. The most plausible interpretation of these sealed chambers, based on the full context of what the scan data reveals about the vessel's construction and purpose, is that they were designed to preserve something specific for the benefit of whoever would eventually find the vessel. A vessel built with the level of sophistication the scans reveal, by builders who understood that a global catastrophe was coming and who had the knowledge to design a biological archive capable of surviving it, would also have understood that the world on the other side of the flood would need more than genetic material. It would need information, knowledge about what the pre-flood civilization had understood, what it had built, and how to avoid repeating the mistakes that led to the reset in the first place. The ancient traditions are consistent on this point across cultures. The survivors of the flood are regularly described as carriers of advanced knowledge that they transmitted to post-flood civilizations, knowledge that appeared in those civilizations in advanced form, without an obvious developmental history. Mathematics, astronomy, architecture, agriculture, and writing all appear in early post-flood civilizations at levels of development that standard archaeological models struggle to account for through gradual development alone. The sealed chambers in the Ararat anomaly may contain the source of that transmitted knowledge in physical form. If the vessel was designed as a time capsule for the civilization that built it, the sealed sections represent the portion of that capsule intended for the generation that would eventually find it, a generation the builders may have known would need what the chambers contain. The fact that the technology now exists to locate and scan the vessel, but does not yet exist in fully deployed form to open and examine it, places the current generation in an unusual position relative to what the ancient builders may have intended. What comes next? The full excavation of the Ararat anomaly has not taken place. Despite decades of interest, the political, logistical, and institutional barriers surrounding a complete and transparent investigation remain significant. Mount Ararat is located in a region where access is carefully controlled and where multiple governments have historical, strategic, and political interests connected to the mountain and its surroundings. The history of restricted access throughout the 20th and 21st centuries suggests that the difficulties involved in studying the site are not simply the result of harsh weather conditions or technical challenges. The mountain itself is one of the most difficult environments on Earth to investigate, with extreme altitude, shifting ice, unstable terrain, and dangerous conditions. However, the additional complications surrounding permits, international oversight, and long-term research efforts have made a full examination even more difficult. The argument for a transparent, internationally supervised excavation is simple. If the anomaly represents an ancient human structure, then its significance extends far beyond the interests of any single country, organization, or religious group. A discovery of this scale would become part of the shared record of human history. It would raise fundamental questions about ancient civilizations, humanity's past, and the stories that have been preserved through thousands of years of tradition. The potential importance of the site is not limited to archaeology. The ancient accounts associated with the Ark describe more than a vessel. They describe preparation, survival, and the preservation of knowledge through a global catastrophe. According to these traditions, the builders of the vessel understood that a crisis was approaching and took extraordinary measures to protect what was considered essential for the future of humanity. The survival of the vessel itself, if confirmed, would raise questions about the people who designed it. It would suggest a civilization capable of planning on a massive scale and creating a structure intended to withstand conditions beyond ordinary human experience. The purpose was not simply transportation, but preservation, protecting life, information, and continuity through an event believed to threaten everything that existed before it. Ancient flood traditions from cultures around the world often describe a similar theme. Warnings were given, but many ignored them. Whether understood literally, symbolically, or historically, these stories reflect a recurring idea that civilizations can become aware of approaching dangers yet fail to respond until it is too late. The information gathered from modern scanning technology represents another piece in the larger puzzle of human history. If future investigation confirms that the anomaly is an ancient vessel, it would become one of the most important archaeological discoveries ever made. If it proves to be something else, understanding the formation would still provide valuable information about geology, ancient landscapes, and human exploration. The question surrounding Mount Ararat is therefore not only what lies beneath the ice, but what humanity chooses to do when confronted with evidence that challenges established assumptions. The technology to investigate the mountain has only recently reached a point where such questions can be seriously explored. The next step depends on whether researchers are allowed to uncover the truth hidden beneath the surface. The scans suggest a massive structure buried high on Mount Ararat, with compartments, unusual materials, and sealed chambers. Supporters argue it is a deliberate construction, preserved through design and conditions, waiting beneath the ice. The full story of what the Ararat scans reveal is still developing. Subscribe so you are there when the next layer of this discovery is uncovered.